Hey, how's it going, everyone? So I apologize again for the late entry for the lecture. Just a lot going on this week. And so this time we're going to be talking about Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor's going to take the entire class for today. And so I'm pretty much going to go over literally every single ounce of Pearl Harbor, as I can remember at least, because there's just a lot of logistics that went into it, a lot of like political debate, also some controversy, some theories and stuff like that, some fun stuff, but also the actual logistics behind the battle itself, the reason, and the actual when it occurred and what happened. And so in the post, I'd mentioned that it is also tragic, but it's also very extremely lucky of what happened at us with us at Pearl Harbor because there's one thing that the Japanese did not do, and so I'm gonna highlight that, and hopefully you guys understand the reason why doing this actually helped us in the long run. And so, with that being said, yeah, it'll just be just this one topic for the class today, and then after that, then I'll split it up. So it'll be like three lectures basically, and then the next one I believe will probably be the Japanese side of things. August, May, yeah, and then I'll go into mostly the European theater after that, and then after that, it'll be pretty much um, on the last run or the last straight leg. It'll be after that. It'll be 50s and 60s, kind of like introduction into the atomic age, and then nuclear development, the Cold War, then Vietnam. Then after that, it'll be mostly political unrest, political assassinations, of course, with JFK, and then like Bay of Pigs, and then we'll go into more so the war in the Middle East after that into the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So yeah, it's the class is going by pretty quickly, and so I did get all of your entries and everything, and so I'm gonna grade those, and so I will be leaving out of town. Actually, like more so like this morning into, well, tomorrow morning into the next day. So I hope to have everything done by then, and then by this weekend at least. But we'll see. But yeah, it'll be pretty busy. But anyways, for this lecture, I also have my next shirt, and so it'll be another P-40 shirt. Haha. And so, same reason, because that is my favorite plane, but also that is the same plane that will be at Hickam Airfield, Wheeler, Iwa Airfield, on base that was attacked. And so it also played a significant part in some of the air battles that took place over Pearl Harbor at the same time as well. And so I'll highlight that as well. And then, if you guys have any questions about or kind of concerns or anything with that, then let me know. Comment, or you can send me an email. Some of these topics are pretty gruesome, and so I definitely enjoy not sugarcoating anything or censoring anything, because you guys just have to grasp the full gravity of the situation at hand and what went on. And so with this battle that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go in depth into small intricate moments that happened here and there, not just the overall generally what happened. And so I'm just going to go through everything, try to immerse everyone in the mix, and try to have everyone understand everything that happened that went into it. And so with that being said, yeah, I'm going to start off with basically at this time, China's being invaded. Claire Chennault, he sent out the American Volunteer Group to defend China in Burma at this time. And so then you got the Eagle Squadron out in Britain as well, helping them out. And then you got the Lend-Lease program kicking off too. And so America is not really involved with the war, but they are at the same time. And so they're trying to stay neutral, but also they're trying to help their allies by this point. And so FDR understood that they will end up getting into the war at some point. He just doesn't know when, and he doesn't want it to be now. and he knows that the industry is not the American um, industrial complex was not at the point where they can fully get into this battle or this war, and he still wants to keep public interest, but at the same time, by this point, the public is starting to sway into more pro war. By this point, they're not fully pro war; they're still neutral. But at this point, because of what's been going on with their allies, some of them were like, "All right, maybe we should be helping out with them." But with that being said, he knew that something was going to happen, but he didn't know what, because then with all the negotiations between Japan and them, Japan was still invading China, and then we also placed an oil embargo on them, so they were not happy with that, and then also with anti-Western sentiment in Japan as well, that was another issue they had to deal with, and so Japan, they figured out that in order to get more resources, of course, they had to take over the Pacific Islands. The Pacific Islands were under the territory of the U.S., so there was some way they had to kick the U.S. out of the Pacific Islands, or at least delay them from defending the Pacific Islands as long as they could. The best thing they could come up with was the attack on Pearl Harbor. And so Pearl Harbor was situated at Oahu, out in Hawaii. It's kind of like second island from the north, and by doing so, they basically pushed the Pacific, the power of the U.S. From the Pacific back into basically the western coast. And so, and of course, we still had people out in Alaska as well, and then Philippines, and all that. But their main force was Pearl Harbor. So taking that out, taking the Naval Air Force and Air Forces in Pearl Harbor, taking those out would definitely at least delay the inevitable, at least. And so Japan ended up assembling a task force. And so their task force consisted of 353 aircraft, which was consisting of 40 torpedo planes. Those were the B5N2 Nakajimas, aka the Kates. And then you also had 131 D-3A dive bombers, the Vals. And then 79 A6M2 Zeros, Type 0, Model 11 aircraft. And those were going to be more so of the support, kind of defend, just in case any of the U.S. aircraft do get airborne, the A6M2 Zeros will take care of those. But those were mainly for support, some strafing here and there, but mostly just support. And then the task force that they assembled was the largest task force of that time, at that time, that was ever assembled. And so the task force consisted of the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, Hiru, Shukaku, and the Zuikaku. Now, keep those aircraft carriers in mind for the future, because those names will come back into play later on. Now, the plan. So I'm going to go into the logistics of everything. So this is going to be kind of a gross idea. So now the plan was for the first wave to attack the main island itself, and then the second wave was to come in from the southeast, and then attack the island from there. And so you got the main force, the first wave, consisting mostly of dive bombers and torpedo bombers. They're going to come in and swoop around, but they're also going to break off. And so some of them are going to go to the north of the harbor, some of them are going to sweep around and come up straight through from south to north, but also another third group is going to branch off, and they're going to come straight into Battleship Row. And so, here you go. Yeah. There we go. All right. So here's how it's pretty much going to go down. So you got Pearl Harbor right there. That's going to be mostly Ford Island right in the middle. And so you're going to have three, well, the first wave is going to come along. This one is going to go straight into the northern part of Ford Island, where mostly you got like the Tangier, the Utah, Raleigh, the Detroit. Those ships are all going to be on the northern part of the island. And then you also have a second wave that's going to come in and then go from, I guess I lied. That's mostly like east to west. They're going to swoop in and start hitting the island itself. And then also, you got, actually, no, sorry. And then you got these dive bombers are going to go actually for Battleship Row. So Battleship Row is going to be mostly on the, kind of like it goes from the eastern tip into the west to eastern tip of the island. And then you also got these aircraft, torpedo bombers are going to swoop around and actually come from the southern tip of the island, and then now they're going to hit Battleship Row straight on. And so this kind of caused some confusion amongst the U.S. because at the time of the attack, you also had a bunch of confusion in terms of where they are at. And so once the planes started hitting, that's when everyone's like, where are they coming from? Well, some people thought from the north, some people thought from the south for that very reason, because the planes are hitting from all over. But you also have, I believe, Hospital Point right here, and then also Hickham's going to be right in the middle there. And then you got the second wave. So the second wave, they're actually going to come from the north, but also swing out to the east. You also have, those are going to be consisted of mostly your high-level bombers and also some dive bombers as well. And so these guys, they're going to swoop around and they're going to hit Hickam, then also Kaneohe Naval, kind of like the air, what was it? It's kind of like an air naval station, sorry. It's going to be right there. And then you also have another branch of them who's going to swoop around and then also attack straight through here as well. So they're going to attack mostly Ford Island as well. And that's the basic gist of how everything is going to go down. Now, the first wave is going to try to attack at 7:40 a.m. The second wave is going to attack an hour later at 8:40. All right. That was the plan, at least. And so, Battleship Row, that consisted of so Pennsylvania, I believe, was moved to dry dock, I want to say. And then you also had the California, Maryland, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Arizona, Nevada. And then aircraft carriers. So the aircraft carriers that were supposed to be there at the time, those were going to consist of the Enterprise, the Lexington, and then the Saratoga. Well, under Admiral Husband Kimmel, he was the basically the chief of all naval command and everything. He was under the notion that there will be an attack on the U.S. He didn't know when, he didn't know where, but there was supposed to be something. So he wanted the naval forces to be out at all times. That was kind of his notion, to kind of like defend them. And so he wanted them out at all times, doing exercises, being war ready. And then once they're in the harbor, that's when the Air Force is going to take over and defend them just in case something does happen. And so that's the basic gist of what the logistics were and what the notion was for the Japanese, that they, at this time on Sunday, they will have all their naval forces in harbor at that time because it's a Sunday. It's supposed to be a day of rest. And so November 26, 1941, the Japanese set sail. And so they're sailing out, and the force consisted of basically 2 heavy cruisers, and then 35 submarines, 2 light cruisers. Then you also got 2 battleships, 11 destroyers, 9 oilers, and then also the 6 aircraft carriers. Like I said, biggest one at the time. And so there's this book called The Great War, and this book came out in 1925 that Admiral Hiro no not Admiral Hirohito Yamamoto. And so Yamamoto, he read this book about how the Japanese and U.S. engaged in this battle in the Pacific, and how the Japanese won through this battle by taking out the large naval air base of the U.S. Naval and air forces of the U.S. in a surprise attack. And so it was a fictional book, but he also used this basically as his plan to actually take out this attack. But also at the same time, this attack was also pointed out towards the Philippines and Guam at the same time. Because one thing that he did realize is that a swift attack is a good attack. And so if you're able to swiftly overwhelm the enemy, then you have the momentum to carry forward to a victory. So some things for you guys to remember. So Yamamoto, he was the one in charge of the task force. And then he's the one that came up with the plan. But you also have so Captain Mitsuo Fuchida. Yeah, so he was the one that was in charge and actually led the attack itself. But also you got, finally, Captain Minoru Genda. Sorry. So he's the one that actually orchestrated and coordinated the whole entire attack. So now you got these three people right there. All right. And so December 6th comes along, and DC actually receives a letter saying that peace talks are not working out. And so this is the day before the attack. And so basically peace talks are impossible. DC gets that. Now DC has to figure out what's going to happen next. Now it doesn't indicate that they're going to attack, but it just says that at this time there is no peace between Japan and the US because of this oil embargo that was happening. So now to the actual attack. I'm going to start drawing here, because this is going to help a lot. So we got Ford Island. Maryland. I'm going to shorthand it for you guys. Maryland. Hesse. V. AZ. Vestal. I guess blue would be a good one. Actually, I'll do black for this. Then north. Then it's gonna be a lot of drawing you gotta do. So now I drew Ford Island, and now I'm gonna draw Hickam, and then also Hospital Point, and then also the dry dock. That'll be it. So that'll be kind of like the main thing that I'll encompass by this point, just to guys help you visually figure out what's going on throughout this whole battle, because there's a lot of timestamps, there's a lot of stuff that like happens all at once. And so got let's see here. All right, cool. Oh. Get that. Okay, that should be about it. I think that was right there too. Okay. Okay. So I will do red for the Japanese forces. Oh shoot, forgot. All right. So, Battleship Row. Let's see here. So, Battleship Row is going to be right there, right at Ford Island, and then also you also got the northern half of the island. It's going to have this row of ships as well. Then also Dry Dock is going to be down there with a bunch of them that I will be talking about as well. You got the tank farm right next to it, but also at Hospital Point, you also got Hickam that's like down there somewhere. All right. And so, at Ford Island, the issue, especially Hickam as well, you also had aircraft that were placed together really closely to avoid sabotage. And so, under the supervision of General Walter Short, he understood that there would be an attack, but he didn't think that there would be a naval attack. He thought that there would be an attack by air. or by sabotage. Sorry. And so, in order to protect those aircraft from any sabotage, he wanted to place them grouped together so they were easy to protect, but also they will be easy to attack by air if there was an air attack as well, or naval attack as well. And so, under Admiral Husband Kimmel, now with his logistical mistake is that yes, he can send out his ships into the sea in order to stay war ready and also be on hand whenever they need it. At the same time, ships cannot stay out at sea forever. They're going to have to return to port at some point. So that was the issue he ran into, is that he did send out these ships, but they all have to come back. The only three ships that didn't come back were the aircraft carriers. And so I believe, if I'm not wrong, the Saratoga was out in California, San Francisco at the time. I believe the Lexington was about 250 miles out, I want to say. 500 miles southeast of Midway, but then you also had the Enterprise, who was 215 miles west of Bahu. And so they actually launched aircraft during the attack. There was a bunch of Dauntless dive bombers, but they didn't know about the attack. They launched them in order to send the aircraft back to the island. And so that's where the logistics kind of come in. All right. And so at about 6:30 in the morning, the USS Ward was patrolling, and it noticed a submarine. And so it, of course, engaged the submarine, and the submarine was sunk. So that happened around like 6:45 a.m. And so at that time, the radar also detected at the naval station at it was north of the island. So north of the island, the radar station detected 4 Japanese carriers. So it was just this large blip, but no one ever really paid attention to it. They just decided to let that one go. And so now at 7 a.m., the Ward sinks contacts another sub, and also contacts a kind of like a civilian, kind of like a fishing boat. And so now they're engaged with trying to figure out why they are within the limits of the island. Now, by this point, I believe it's like 7:15 a.m. So by this point, 7:02 a.m. Now, U.S. Private Joseph Lockard, and this was his first shift, I believe, at this new radar station. And so he was trying to train Private George Elliott on how to use this system and everything. And this system was roughly like 1 to 2 years old. So the British first used the radar system, I believe, in 1939. And so this one is, of course, brand new to the U.S. They've never used it in a wartime like exercise or anything. And so at the time when he was training this person, he spotted this large mass coming towards from the north. And so he radioed Lieutenant Kermit Taylor. He radioed him about it. And so Kermit Taylor also understood that there was a flight of B-17s coming in from California. And they were supposed to actually arrive around like 7:30 to 8 o'clock a.m. And so he understood that probably is what's going on. So he said to continue with the training, just disregard that. That will be a tragic mistake. So at the same time, a telegram was received for a possible Japanese attack and by the code breakers, but they decided to just ignore it because there was no indication of an attack. There was no sight of the enemy. Well, there was no sight of the enemy. And so they decided to just completely disregard that telegram. And now there we go. Ugh. So, by this time, most of the aircraft are in the air. So now they're approaching the airfield, and then by this time, the first person to get into the air is Lieutenant Saburo Shindo. So Shindo, he's now circling the aircraft carriers, waiting for all of 300, well, all of the 100 and what, 60, 70 aircraft to get airborne for the first wave. And so finally, they do. They're approaching. They're about 35 miles out. So by 7:30, they're about 35 miles. Now, 7:39 comes along. They're about 20 miles out. And now, so Oahu is in sight by this time. Fuchida fires his first flare. So the first flare goes up. And so then, by this time, he signals to go into attack positions. So now they're approaching from the north now. Where is it? So now, yeah, they're about just right above Oahu by this point. And so now they're in attack positions. A telegram is sent out by Fuchida saying like toe 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 to start the attack. This is by like 7:49 a.m. And so another radar comes up at 7:48, just a minute before, spotting this attack, but no one takes no one looks more into it. And so finally, red. So now, 7:49 comes along to commence the attack, and then 7:53 a.m. Fuchida sends another radio telegram back to the task force saying Tora Tora Tora, hence the name of the movie back in, I believe, what, the 80s, 70s, 80s, Tora Tora Tora. And so, or 90s possibly. And they achieve surprise, and the attack begins. Now, 7:55 a.m., it is noticed that everything was super quiet. Then all of a sudden there was a large explosion. At the mess hall, and on Hickam. And so no one understood what was going on at all. It was a complete surprise. They thought it was just a freak accident. 35 sailors ended up dying by this point. And so everyone's kind of like freaking. They don't know what's going on. And so now, by this point, let's see here if I can draw this. So Hickam was attacked. And then you got there we go. So then you got these torpedo bombers that are now swoop into a low level position. And now they split up. They split up and attack Battleship Row straight on. So now, get to it. Where is it? There we go. So now, let's see if I can branch this out. So California. Utah. All right. So, then all right. So, 7:55 to 7:58. You got. I wish I could just put it up here so you guys can see it better. So you got the ships to the north. You got the Utah, the Raleigh. Those are both hit by torpedoes. And so, there we go. Actually, I'm going to go dark blue this time. There we go. So those are both hits. Those are, I don't know, those are water geysers. And so now you also got, I'm going to tip this down a bit. There you go. Yeah. So now you also got another flight of torpedo bombers that are heading towards the Oglala and the Helena. And so now one torpedo actually goes right through underneath the Oglala, hits the Helena, and then actually damages both of them. So now you got that going on. And then also now from the south, not only did they hit Hickam down here, but also these guys flew up and they split off. So now California was then hit. The Oklahoma was hit by 3 torpedoes. Then you also got the West Virginia that was hit by a torpedo. All right. So then by this point as well, 758 comes along. People start waking up. Doris Miller, he was on board the West Virginia. And he ended up actually, taking care of his ship captain. So, I think it was, captain. And so he ended up taking care of his captain who was mortally wounded during that attack. And he manned a gun, or he manned a ship, ship gun. And then he started firing back. And so he was not trained on how to use weapons. Most of the African Americans at that time period were regulated to more so support roles. So mostly your cooks, maintenance workers, things like that. And so he took command of a gun installation on the West Virginia, and he's credited with shooting down at least 1 aircraft as well, 1 to 2 aircraft depending on the source that you read. And so he does that, and oh my gosh, let me go back to my notes. All right, and so once he does that, people start waking up, and so by this time, the first enemy aircraft was shot down. Now the whole sirens go off, and then they say, hey, this is an air raid at Pearl Harbor. This is no drill. And so then, now, 8 a.m., I guess I'll use... I'll use purple. All right. So now, 8 a.m., all this chaos happens, and so now the Nevada starts opening fire on everything. So I'm going to do that. So Nevada's the battleship on the farther end. She starts opening fire on the aircraft, and then ends up shooting down 5 B-5N2 torpedo bombers. And so then after that, 8:04 a.m. and 35 seconds. So, give me one moment. Keep this up. Keep that. Keep that. One moment. All right. So, I'm into scale models, and so I build them. And so this is my scale model of the Arizona. So 8:04 a.m. and 35 seconds. Lieutenant Naburo Kanai. So he drops a high-level bomb, and he's over the Arizona. So now the high-level bomb actually. So the Arizona is kind of situated. Yeah. So now the high-level bomb actually ends up hitting the number 2 turret. So it hits the number 2 turret about like right here, or actually more so like right here, and it glances off, and it actually goes through the deck of the ship into where the the ammunition magazine is. And so that proves, of course, tragic. Pierces through the gun magazine storage and it explodes. The ship gets lifted 30 feet into the air. About 1,113 people actually end up perishing straight off the bat. But then there's another 4 people who were trapped in the main mast once it settles off. So then another group of bombers, they actually come through. So Arizona explodes. So another group of aircraft actually come through and strafe the Arizona, and then another 4 people who were stuck in the main mast, though they were all killed. So now in total, 1,117 sailors and shipmates ended up dying in that. So now, this chaos is going on, and so then by this time as well, especially after the explosion, the Arizona starts attacking back. And so the gunnery positions on board the Arizona go on for another like 15 or so minutes. So then by 8:20 a.m., all the guns on the Arizona go silent. She's lost. She's in flames. So then now people start retreating back to the mainland, Tennessee, and the Vestal right next to it. All right. Oh gosh. Okay. So now, by this time as well, Lieutenant George Welch and Lieutenant Kenneth Taylor, they both hear that there's an attack going on at Pearl Harbor. They need to get back. They were out drinking and having a good time playing cards, I believe. And so they stayed up till like the wee hours of the morning, right before the attack, actually. And so they were woken back up. They heard that the attack was going on, so then they traveled down to, I believe it was Ewa Airfield. It was a newer airfield at the time, so not much was there at the time. And so Ewa Airfield, they were traveling there. They were attacked by some Japanese aircraft, but of course they made it to the airfield. And so then by this time, they were trying to get planes fueled up, and then they're going to fly up and they're going to maintain an altitude between like 8 to 10,000 feet. So then they ended up finding a handful of aircraft, about like 6 aircraft. And so they ended up actually diving in on those aircraft, and then both of them actually downed 2 aircraft. So like 4 aircraft total they ended up shooting down by that time. So now you got Lieutenant George Welch and Kenneth Taylor are in the air by this point. So now 8:30 a.m. The attack ends. So in the span of roughly like 40 minutes, you now have 3 battleships on Battleship Row that are sunk. You got 2 ships up north, the Utah and the Raleigh, who were also severely damaged. You got the Oglala and the Helena, who were also damaged as well by this point. So now, George Welch and Kenneth Taylor, they're surveying. They don't really find any more aircraft, so they land really quick just to rearm. So by this time, they take off in P-40Bs, and so they only have, I believe, 30 caliber ammo in the wings. They don't have 50 caliber ammo in the nose. So when they land, it's about 8:55 a.m. and they land back at Ewa Airfield, and then they also prep with 50 caliber ammo by this point. At the same time, you also have the SBD Dauntlesses that arrive from the Enterprise, and they also land at Ewa Airfield. Ewa Airfield is actually going to be, I believe, just north of here. And so, by this time, there's also a Curtiss seaplane that's out patrolling. They notice as there's an incoming, so this is about 8:54, 8:55 as well still. All this is happening at the same time. You have a patrol plane that flies in, and it explains that there's another attack coming. Well, this is actually pretty cool because the harbor is actually ready. They're war ready now. So now, this is where shit gets real, basically. So now, so you have the ships in dry dock. So now all these ships, so there's some more here and there, some smaller ones here and there, but essentially the main ones I wrote down. And so by this point, they know there's an attack coming now. So, Shizumaki, is the next flight leader. So he signals to attack. Now that's an issue because now they know. So now um, the Cunningham, Tucker, and the USS Medusa all open fire. So all of them are, I believe, most of them are on the southern half of the island. I want to say. So yeah. So now, once this second flight is coming in, they see anti-aircraft fire coming up. So I believe there might be a picture out there of Pearl Harbor with a bunch of anti-aircraft fire. So this is, I believe, during the second wave that happens. And so 9:55, 8:55 a.m., the whole island erupts in gunfire, and by 9 a.m., five other airmen in, I believe, P-40s, they end up attempting to take off, but all of them are shot. Oh, there might be P-36s. Yes, they're P-36s. So they all try to take off, but all five of them, I believe, are shot down before they can get into the air. So all five of those crew members are killed. By 9:04 a.m., Shigemori Fujita, so another guy, he ends up heading towards Wheeler Field. And so you got. Yeah, I thought I had this one. Okay. Alright. So, Wheeler Field. So now you got this second wave coming in from this side. So Hickham's over here. He ends up heading towards Wheeler. Oh, shoot. Oh, man. I'm drawing a blank on Wheeler. Shoot. Yeah, so he ends up heading towards Wheeler. I believe that's, yeah, that's up here. Let's see here. Okay. Shoot. Where is it? Oh man. So, why am I drawing a blank right now? Of course, it would be now. Of all things. Wow, I'm getting into my zone, you know? Jeez. Ah, yes, of course. Oh, man, what's wrong with me? So... oh, man. Oh. So now, by this time, you got Fujita, who heads towards Wheeler, so he's like flying up here. So he heads over there to attack the actual main Army Air Force hub. So where all those aircraft are at. So now you got Admiral Pye. So he notices that actually. So by this time, so it's roughly like 9 a.m. to 9:04 still. The California starts like shaking. So there's like maybe it's a bomb, maybe that it's like an internal explosion, and so now you got this whole bay is now on fire. Yeah. Oh. So now you got this whole bay is on fire with black smoke and everything. So now it's also super hard to find any other ships in this bay. All right. So by this time, a lot of these other ships try to leave port. So you also got the Henley. You also have bunch of other ships, the Ida, bunch of other ships trying to make way. The Nevada starts ramping up its engines, trying to get out of Dodge as well. And so now you got people who are firing back, also other ships trying to get out of the harbor as well. And so the air attack begins. Fujita, he heads towards Wheeler, and Welch, Taylor, Lieutenant Robert Rogers, Second Lieutenant Harry Brown, and then I believe Lieutenant Rasmussen, Philip Rasmussen, Louis Sanders. They all get airborne. So all of them are in a mix of P-36 and P-40s. So Fujita actually notices them. And so and Gordon Sterling. So all of them get airborne. And so now, they engage in this kind of like turn-based war or battle in the air above Wheeler. And Fujita actually evades and ends up getting on Gordon Sterling's high side and actually damages him. And so now you got, once he damages them, Louis Sanders actually comes in from behind. So I believe it's Louis. Louis Sanders actually comes from behind and then attacks Fujita. But at the same time, behind Sanders is another Zero. And so all of them are basically in line. Sterling, he is heading towards the ground or the bay because all his controls are shot. His plane's damaged. He can't get out because then Fujita's firing behind him as well. Well, then behind Sanders, or behind Fujita, you have Sanders, who's now firing on him, but also trying to evade the other aircraft behind him. So it's just this long line of aircraft heading down towards the bay. So Louis Sanders notices this, and he radios to Sterling to get out because, of course, they're heading towards the bay. So Sanders pulls up, nobody else does. Fujita's plane is also severely damaged as well. He can't evade or anything too, so he just continues down. And so by this point, once Sanders pulls out this dive, he notices that he's the only aircraft that actually pulled out. All the other three of them actually crash into the bay, and Gordon and Fujita are both killed. Lieutenant Philip Rasmussen. So at the Air Force Museum, you will see his P-36. Well, you'll see a P-36 with a mannequin with a pair of pajamas. Those are his actual pajamas that he had during the attack when he jumped into the P-36 and got airborne. And so Rasmussen actually ends up shooting down one Japanese pilot before his plane is severely damaged. His radio communications got knocked out, and he had to crash land. Another man by the name of Lieutenant Brown at the same time, he actually ended up saving Lieutenant Robert Rogers, and then he ends up shooting down another enemy aircraft on his 6. And so that's the whole air battle that's going on above Wheeler to the north. And now you got the Pennsylvania. So the Pennsylvania is also in dry dock down here. So that is going to be hit by another torpedo. So you got another torpedo plane coming through here. So that gets hit in dry dock. So then also by this time the Oglala starts capsizing as well. With this whole anti-aircraft, the Cunningham ends up shooting down another enemy aircraft plane, and then the USS Pennsylvania, when it's struck, about 12 men are killed by this bomb. And so then, 9:11 a.m., the USS Dale ends up shooting down 5 bombers that are approaching the field as well, Ford Island. And now, by like 9:20 or so, the fighters from the Soryu, they start heading to Kaneohe, the naval station. And so, while at the same time, they also have another flight that is heading towards Wheeler again. Well, Welch and Taylor, they land to rearm, they take off again, but only with half the ammo because they notice that there's another flight coming in at the same time. So they actually see this flight coming in. So then when they take off, they actually head straight into the squadron. And so then they head straight into the enemy aircraft. It's about like 8 aircraft that they head into. They attempt to evade, and they actually get into a good position on some of them, and they actually end up shooting down, I believe, one each. And so Welch defended Taylor and shot down one, and then they both evade, and then I believe Taylor might have shot down another one, but I can't remember. All in all, actually no. So Taylor ends up shooting down 3, and then Welch ends up shooting down 4. I want to say. It was a total like 7 aircraft that they shot down. And so by 9:30, the Cassine and the Dawes, USS Dawes, those end up exploding. So those are severely damaged by their ammo magazines. The USS Blue ends up shooting down 6 other planes as well due to anti-aircraft fire. The St. Louis, which is also in dry dock right here. So the St. Louis here, yeah, right here. So it ends up trying to leave dry dock. So it gets underway. The Vestal, where is that? Oh, sorry. The Vestal is officially abandoned, and so that is also sinking as well. So now the Welch and Taylor, they get up into the air again, and this is about like 10:05 a.m. So they get up into the air again. Say they start patrolling Hewett Airfield, and then also at the same time, the Oglala is hit by 2 torpedoes. So now we got Oglala is down as well. And then the Shaw's also attacked, and I believe the Shaw's magazine also explodes. So there's like a famous picture of a large explosion. I believe that's from the USS Shaw. So then, yeah, you got this picture from Ford Island looking over into the dry dock where the Shaw explodes. So then at the same time, outside of the harbor, you still have submarines trying to get in. So the USS Ward, it's putting in its work. It's out there. It sunk a submarine at 11:27, and I believe at 11:35 a.m., the USS Breeze goes out and sinks another submarine. And then I believe by noon, there was another sub by the name of, there's a guy now by the name of Officer, well, I believe because of how names are said, I believe his actual name would be Kazu Sakamaki, or Sakamaki Kazuo. And so he actually beaches his submarine on a reef. And he didn't know that there was a reef there. So he beaches it. The U.S. Coast Guard ends up capturing him. He becomes the official first POW of the Pacific War. And so his sub is then captured. And then later on, it's captured. And then it's actually used to kickstart America's submarine program. So if you kind of want to know where we got our subs, well, the Japanese, technically from Pearl Harbor. Anyway, so by this time, I'm gonna see here. That. Cool. So by this time, all these aircraft start returning to the to their respective aircraft carriers, and so now by this time you got large scale, widespread shutdown of the island. You got patrols everywhere. Welch and Taylor, they end up landing because they don't find any more aircraft, and so then by 2 p.m. actually, there's this one. So there's this one instance where an aircraft crash lands, and the pilot, of course, survives and everything. And then this inhabitant actually sees him and goes on to help. He didn't know that the Pearl Harbor was under attack. And so he goes on to help him. And, oh, there's the cat. There you go. So he goes on to help him, and there's the two Japanese residents, actually. They ended up going up to help him. And so this guy like freaks out, and so he ends up going along and burning down the house, and then he actually makes this makeshift gun position. And so then, at the same time, this guy by the name of Kanahele, he ends up trying to attack Sakaijo. Sakaijo, I believe that's the guy's name, the crash land. He ends up attacking him, and Sakaijo kind of like takes his wife by hostage. And so Kanahale, he ends up wrestling free, and he from the other guy, and he ends up attacking Sakaijo, and Sakaijo ends up like shooting Kanahale in the side, I believe, or something like that. Doesn't even phase him. This guy's like brute force. So he goes up and actually starts beating the shit out of Sakaijo and actually beats him to death. So that's kind of like one small instance where like this civilian ended up killing a Japanese fighter pilot or dive bomber pilot. And so by this time it's like in the afternoon, 3:30, 4 o'clock. So fire suppression begins. Also, the Oklahoma's completely upside down. They start hearing people or the hull being banged with survivors underneath. So they now need to cut them out and everything. And now the battle is actually over. So now, yeah, all this rescue efforts begin now. And so by this time, the ensign of the Japanese Air Forces it sends back saying that there is there was a complete surprise attack and it was a complete success. So, let me put this back. So now there's some issues. Now politically, this was a punch to the gut for the U.S. And so now at the U.S. Embassy in Japan, they are told to just completely burn all documents, leave the embassy, try to get back to the U.S. Well, Japan's quarrel is with the U.S. military, not U.S. citizens. And so the U.S. ambassador, or the Japanese ambassador, U.S. ambassador in Japan, the Japanese end up letting him leave. And so, oh man, let me get this here. So there you go. All right, so now Masuo Kato, so he ends up securing the crowd at the Japanese embassy, and well, actually, he's the one that was the ambassador, so he tries to leave, and you got people who are trying to, kind of like keep the crowd at bay. And so at this time, he lets him go, the Japanese ambassador, and he's basically saying like, this is you're the last son of a bitch I'm gonna let leave. That's exactly what he says. So he lets him leave and everything. By this time as well, FDR finds out about the attack like hours after everything happens. He ends up finding out about it. At the same time, actually, about 8 a.m., he actually sends a letter to Japan saying that, hey, are we going to keep up with these peace talks or not? So he had no idea this attack was going on. And actually, the Japanese were going to send a letter saying that all this, basically, like, they're going to be at war literally moments before the attack happened. So we don't know if it's a case of if it was on purpose, just because they knew nothing was going to change the fact, or they didn't know if because of the international dateline was that they actually sent the letter on December 7th, even though it was December 6th for them. So who knows what happened there. So then FDR calls for a cabinet meeting to go over what's been going on. He makes his speech, and at this point he knows that they're going to go to war. He knows that the public is is pro-war by this point. But that's only in Hawaii. That no one on the mainland knows. So now he has to prepare to basically change America into a war industry, a warring state, basically. So he writes his speech. He's careful with his words. He's constantly going through it in his head. He's constantly writing down, making corrections and stuff like that. Talking um, to his fellow what his not employees or like coworkers or the people in his office. He talks to his wife about it. He tries to make it so like it speaks with conviction and stuff like that. And so, um, essentially, he changes the first part to. I believe he either adds in or changes it to a date that will live in infamy. And so, let's see here. Oh my God, I'm screwing up. So there we go. All right. So essentially, he gets up around. This is around like maybe. I want to say this is about noon, about a little after noon. So he gets up in front of the cabinet and everything, and so or Congress, and then he starts saying, of course, December 7th, 1941, date that will live in infamy. The United States was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. So then he goes on to explain that Japan also attacked like Malaya, Hong Kong, Guam, the Philippines, on Wake Island, and then Midway Island. So now Midway's Island is essentially captured by now. So this is basically like a lightning war. Essentially, they just steamrolled through the Pacific and took over all these islands. So then he goes in to talk about how the American people are ready and they have their opinions about what's been going on, but the fact of the matter is that this is for the defense of their country. Then he starts finally saying that basically that the U.S. will remember what Japan did regardless of whether they go to war or not, and that the American people, with no matter how long it takes, their livelihood and land is in danger. And so they need to act now. And so then he goes on to say that with confidence in our armed forces, with unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. So that's a really cool kind of like tidbit right there. And so then lastly, he goes on to state that essentially he's asking for a state of war has existed between the U.S. and the Japanese Empire, and then he finishes off with that with Congress. So he asks Congress to declare a state of war, but he doesn't. Sorry. So he doesn't ask for a declaration of war, but he wants to ratify the fait accompli. So essentially, he doesn't want to ask Congress, but he tells Congress that essentially the U.S. is in war right now. There's no changing that. So, yeah, so that's kind of like how things go down. So one actually cool tidbit as well, not cool, but this is kind of like a small little tidbit as well. During the actual battle itself, I believe at Wheeler, I want to say. And so, I think Colonel Sands, he was basically working as a aviation ordnance man. And with, I think, Officer Ida, or Lida, so he actually dives in and notices Sands. And so he starts, like, strafing the airfield, and actually Sands is just sitting there, and he ends up, like, shooting the wall behind him. So Sands looks up and grabs his bar. So it's basically it's an assault rifle. I guess assault rifles aren't really assault rifles, but I forget what the actual connotation for BAR stands for. But he grabs a bar, and basically it's just this large rifle. I believe it's chambered in, I want to say 30-06. I want to say, but don't quote me on that. I'm kind of rusty on on guns in general. I have guns, but I'm so rusty on them. But basically, Lita pulls off, and then he turns back around, and then he goes for another pass. So Sans orders to get another gun. So he's given another gun, and he shoots back at him as well. And so Lita fires on him again. Well, Lita misses again. So then Lita's plane, because of all the gunfire he was taking, ends up starting to actually leak fuel. And so he knows that he's not going to be able to make it back. The plane is damaged now from this rifle being shot at him. And so instead of just abandoning the mission, Lita turns back around, goes back at him again. So Sans, by this point, he's like, oh, he's leaving. So Sans is walking back. Well, before he actually gets inside the door, another crewman actually looks back and sees that Lita turning back around. So he tells Sans, hey, he actually, like, quote for quote, he says, hey, Sans, that son of a bitch is coming back around. So Sans is like, all right, let's have another crack at it. Sans grabs another rifle and from that soldier, actually, and then he's just standing in a doorway and then walks into the Zero's line of fire. And so both of them are shooting at each other, and no one's making any hits. Well, supposedly, Sans actually hits the pilot, because as soon as the pilot gets within like hundreds of feet of him, the pilot, he evades, or Sans gets out the way, and the pilot actually dives straight into the kind of like the field, or not cliff, but kind of like a hill. He dives the plane into the hill behind him, gets killed instantly. And so that's kind of like a cool little tidbit here and there for like a little like bar fact, in case you want to go to the bar and talk about a cool little thing that happened at Pearl Harbor. But essentially by the end of it, 29 aircraft are lost. In the first wave, you got 3 fighters, 1 dive bomber, and then 5 torpedo planes. In the second wave, you got another 6 fighters, 14 dive bombers, and then also with American losses, you got 165 aircraft, most of them P-40s, P-36s, and stuff like that. Some B-17s, Dauntless dive bombers, stuff like that. You also got 18 ships that are sunk in the harbor itself. You got 1,178 people who are wounded, with another 2,400 killed. 2,403 if you're being, if you want specifics. And so this was tragic all around. You got people as young as 18, 19 years old who were killed. And then you also got civilians, I believe like 65 civilians or something like that ended up dying as well. So this is a straight up blow to the gut. But essentially, in terms of what happened, though, we were lucky. Well, why, Mr. B? Why are we lucky? Well, because earlier on, when there was some logistics in terms of, so they had informants on the bay, or in Hawaii, who were within eyesight of the island. So they were able to radio back to the Japanese task force of where these ships are in the harbor at the time. So their info was actually slightly off. So at the time when they launched the attack, guess what was supposed to be right here? 3 of them. All 3 aircraft carriers was actually supposed to be, I believe they were supposed to be stationed right here, to the east of Ford Island. I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's where they're supposed to be stationed at. And then, also, guess what was not even touched? There you go. You got the tank field. So that's where all their fuel and oil was at. So, because that tank field was not touched, essentially, we could rearm and send out our ships. Also, sorry. So shoot. Earlier on too, I totally forgot. I believe around like 9 a.m. as well. The Nevada actually ends up trying to get through this bay, and so ends up trying to get here to beach itself or to block the entrance to the harbor. And so by this time, I believe it's roughly around like 18 dive bombers end up attacking the Nevada. Nevada's like going balls to the wall trying to shoot down these aircraft, and I believe like 4 bombs end up hitting the Nevada, and she's starting to list, and so she ends up beaching herself at the opening of the bay. And so that's another cool tidbit, was that Nevada was kind of like this victorious. It was essentially, it gave so much more of a morale boost, because now people are seeing, hey, our ships are getting underway. The Nevada's fighting back, and so we're putting the hurt to them. So that was another cool little thing that happened during the attack, and so, or a very significant thing that happened during the attack. But that tank farm, the tank farm was filled with fuel and oil. Had they destroyed that, we would have not been able to get our ships up and running again. Basically, actually within the year, most of them within the year, most of them were actually now operable again. And so the two mistakes was that they could not locate our our aircraft carriers, and they didn't destroy our tank farm with our fuel and oil. Two mistakes that proved highly detrimental within the next year when they go to face us at Midway. And so there you go. That is the whole grand scheme of Pearl Harbor. Now that Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor, had attacked the Philippines, Solomon Islands, stuff like that. So now we are now on the defensive, trying to make sure our territories are now protected. But that's an issue, because now our naval base is completely, well, not completely, but mostly in flames. So a couple books that I really wish that you guys should check out is All the Gallant Men by Donald Stratton. And so this one. And so this is about the last survivor of the Arizona, or by a survivor of the Arizona. And he talks about how no one knows how horrible this battle was. And so he talks about how literally the whole entire bay was filled with oil and fuel and fire, and he ended up having to actually see people swim through that, because once these ships exploded, it ignited the bay, and so literally it was hell on earth. And so then you also had December 7th, 1941 by Gordon W. Prang. So he essentially gives timestamps of everything that happened. He did extensive research, interviews, and he talked about the whole entire battle itself. So those are two cool books that I took info from to create this whole scenario for you guys. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I love talking about this a lot. So if you want to talk more about it, I'm so happy to talk about it. I've never been to Pearl Harbor, but I would love to get there at some point, just to kind of see in person what happened. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to hit me up. Put them down in the comment section and everything. And so then next time I'm going to go into basically trying to push back the Japanese. So we'll see how that goes. It's kind of a mystery if you guys don't know about what happened in the Pacific War, but also, spoiler alert, things end up switching in our favor, but it takes some time. But otherwise, yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed everything. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my scale model of the Arizona, and me demonstrating like what actually happened. And so then otherwise I will talk to you guys next time about the Pacific War. And so hopefully I'll get that going the next week. But it'll be another busy week for me as well. I'm going into this next part of the term for paramedic school and everything. But I'll try to be more diligent about making contact with you guys on everything. But otherwise, if that's it, I'll let you guys go. And so, like I said, if you have any questions, want to talk about more of the battle itself, let me know. Otherwise, yeah, take care. All right.